Welcome to What the Theory with Joel. I'm Joel, and this is part 4 of the Marxist critique of modern life. The last episode was on the commodity fetish, and today we're going to be talking about the society of the spectacle. Now, what I didn't mention in the last video was what Marx called fetishism, and I think it's going to be important as I pivot into society of the spectacle. So what I'm doing with this series of videos is just looking at ideas that we take for granted. We talked about the middle class. We talked about, for instance, the hand of the market, the sort of invisible hand of market forces. In the last one, we talked about why commodities are very important. But today I want to talk about more in a modern sense, how that fetishization of commodities is mediated by the things that we see, the images that are very popular around us. But I want to start with one of the things Marx mentioned about fetishism. He called it the religion of sensuous appetites. The fantasy of the appetites that trick the fetish worshipper into believing that an inanimate object will yield its natural character to gratify the desires of the worshipper. When I read that, it seems sort of obscure, but what he's really saying is that there is an apparent sort of magical quality that exists. Modern life has brought us to a point where we don't think magically, we don't think from a metaphysical point. We sort of partition those things, if you're a religious person, into and after the fact you sort of say, well, God intended for this to happen, but he almost moves in the world invisibly in such a way that you don't need to explain it. At a metaphysical level, the idea is not that there are spiritual forces making things happen, but that ideas are almost as real as actions. The causes, the purposes behind why you do something, that logic, once agreed upon with other people, exerts a force on you. The example that I like to take is in a corporation. Now, in economics, corporate personhood refers to treating an organization as if it were an artificial person. It has a voice, it's able to contribute to causes, it can be protected, all those kinds of things. It can own property, for instance. Now, if you look in a corporation is not the building, it's not, I guess the brands. Those are signifiers of that thing. What it really is the agreements of people who sit around a table who've said that their investments and their commitments, which are followed by them contributing cash or equity into that service, represent the decision of a body incorporated. That's what the personhood is. But there are instances where you will make a decision and the logic of those individuals, those people who sit around that table, each individual does not agree wholly with the decision that has been taken. But in order for consensus to be built, everyone sort of concedes a little bit such that a decision has been passed by the body corporate. So in effect, the metaphysical issue is that none of the individuals wanted that thing to come about. They all had maybe varying degrees of the components of whatever that decision might be. Let's say you want to set up a factory and then you pick land which some individuals think was more beautiful as a playground for children. Others might think that they should set up a factory, but they need to set it up in such a way that they maintain the grounds. But for the official reasons of making it profitable to the company, they can't afford to make that decision. So the constraint of putting the company's needs above whatever the individuals think takes precedence, such that it's as though that corporation has a seat at that table and then influences the decision being made. And that's sort of what we talk about in terms of the relations that subsist and control certain decisions that are being made. Now today I want to talk about the spectacle. If you follow the history of maybe industrialization, the critique of Marxism has always been that the argument would be that the wage laborer, the person who sells their labor, their time, in order to get compensated and get paid by the capitalist, their wages have to be suppressed because in order for profit to be maximized, you need to make sure that the costs of production are as low as possible. Now, there are a couple of ways you can do that. You might introduce machinery to increase efficiency. You might get more skilled workers, but you always need to pay the worker slightly less than what they're creating so that you can extract that extra value. But in modern times, you find that they're very well paid wage laborers. Probably if you're watching this, it's unlikely that the vast amount of money that you earn, you get from simply owning capital, but you probably own some capital, but you had to sell your wage labor in order to obtain it. The way you know that you're probably not a capitalist and part of that class is if you lost your job for like say 2 years, would you still be in the same place? Would you not have to make some decisions? OnlyFans, what's up? So the fact that you continually, even if you are earning a little bit more, you're still part of a class that has to sell your labor in order for you to survive. Now, the purpose for that, the reason for that, as more thought has been put into this development, is that the rationale for continuous production is such that you have to keep making more and more. And so as efficiencies increase, more and more goods are created. This is where post-colonial theory, for instance, links the rise of empire with the rise of capitalist nations. America is the weird empire in that we think of imperialism more, I guess, from the British Empire, which was literally going and colonizing different lands in order to be able to extract more raw materials, to be able to sell more. But the world is a finite space, and eventually you start to realize that you can't keep discovering new lands from which you can extract more value and then sell to other individuals. Now, in order for that relation to subsist, more and more has to be given to us as the wage laborers so that we can consume. You need people who are going to consume. Now, consumption, if you look at old ads, they're usually just telling you like, hey, buy this thing, it's cool, it works, that's it. But if you watch any ad now, they rarely tell you just about the product, but they show you what you can be with that product. They show you, like I spoke about in the example before, about what a kind of person who uses a Mac looks like, what the kind of person who drives a German car is like. If they, those ads where they're even telling you about, I guess, taking Viagra. If you're taking Viagra, they show you like an elderly person who's enjoying their life, running around, having a good time. They almost look like they don't have jobs. Like the only issue has been, man, they just needed this little blue pill in order for them to stick it. And then towards the end, there are all those warnings that go by really quickly about what this thing can do to you. And if you think about it, what they're selling you is not any good salesperson. Doesn't sell you just the product. They sell you the dream of the product. They sell you what you could be with that. Now, if we pivot all the way to the psychoanalysts, their idea is that desire is a fundamental lack at the base of who we are. There's a video I did on desire, which you can check in the past episodes. And in a summarized version, we live sort of in a weird, this is a bit difficult to get into. So I'll use the example of paradise. And this is something I'll get into when we discuss Hegel sometime. In the story of the Garden of Eden, we are told that Adam and Eve lived in the garden. They ate of the tree of knowledge, at which point they realized they were naked. God asked them, what the hell you been doing? And our guy Adam, the ancestor of future, really blamed women. Said, this woman that you gave me. And they were cast out of the garden. Now, the reading of that is that we were once in paradise and we were kicked out to this world. The reverse reading, the Hegelian sort of negation, is that it only became paradise after Adam and Eve left it. When Adam and Eve were in paradise, it was not even described as the greatest thing. I mean, God does say everything that you need is here, but you don't get the sense that there was enjoyment. It was just, they were almost like animals. They lived off of instinct. There was no need for deliberation. Now, once knowledge comes into humanity, you become aware of your separateness from nature. Think of the way we talk about nature. We talk about it as, the animals, the plants, and we are the ones saving the population. We came out of it, but we're not part of it. Now, it only looks like paradise when we find within ourselves that there is a desire, there is a lack within us. And that desire, that feeling, just like C.S. Lewis used to write, is that if I find within myself a desire that is not satisfied within here, probably it is from the world beyond. The thought was that every keyhole has a key. Every appetite has a satiation, has something that it can consume. But the Hegelian take on it is that maybe it's the fact that we feel fractured, this feeling that things can all come together only arises after we realize that we are fractured. And so paradise only exists because we can't reach it, because we can never get to it, because we can never go back to living in ways that I don't think any modern person can live. I mean, if you took away modern plumbing from me, I think I would have a very big problem. It would be an issue. In order to live that life, humanity would have to almost regress back to a point where we sometimes think, when you watch movies like the Flintstones, that movie was fantastic, by the way, Halle Berry. That's beside the point. If you think about it, the Flintstones is a modern person living in, I guess what age is that? They're living with dinosaurs. It's not even scientifically accurate. But if you were to meet people who lived then, they probably wouldn't even know what an individual is. Their conception, their understanding of the world would be so different from ours as to relegate them more to the animal kingdom than to ourselves, living probably to just survive, to meet our basic needs. Now, civilization and humanity and the ability to think and reason and all the things that we admire with art and music and conceptions of creating families and creating institutions like the church, all of that comes after we've left the state of nature. Similarly, if you think about desires, when someone is selling you something, they are selling you the illusion that you could be whole again. And when I say illusion, it's a helpful illusion. I'm not sort of saying this as if it's, how can I say, I'm not making a moral argument against it. I'm simply saying that if you're aware of it, you're able to control it. You're able to not make it an unhealthy relationship that you have with images. Now, why I talk about the spectacle is we are inundated with images. If you watch, there's a documentary about, I think, the Century of the Self. It's available on YouTube. I highly recommend that you watch it. There's a discussion there on the guy Edward Bernays, who's the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and his work was pivotal in changing what advertising and PR are. And one of the examples there is smoking. So men typically are the ones who used to buy cigarettes. Women were seen as, that's a filthy habit, you're not meant to take that on. But during the women's liberation movement, he was very brilliant in giving out cigarettes to a lot of the suffragettes who were, fighting for women's equality. And they were sort of called torches of freedom. Now, at that point, the commodity fetish, the cigarette was no longer just a cigarette. It was a signal to the world that I am independent, that I go against the rules. Now, that resulted in an increase in sales of cigarettes. And the pernicious thing about that is you've got a commodity which allows you to identify yourself to other people. Because again, identity is rooted in recognition. If I think I'm cool and no one else thinks I'm cool, I am delusional. And that's why I need someone else to recognize who I am. If the only way you can recognize who I am is mediated by something that is being sold to me, I very quickly could fall into a fetishized form of relationship with that commodity. and then it's hidden, it's obfuscated by the images that we see. I spoke about Nike, for instance. We think about it as the just do it company, as the one that has cool shoes and the rest, blah, blah, blah. But we also know that it had was it the 1980s? There was a period where it was marketing it as women who are independent and strong wear Nikes. You know, they go out jogging, they choose their fashion, and you know, all of that. The irony was that the reason those outfits were being created and those shoes were being created is that Indonesian women were being exploited in means that were completely terrible. So it didn't matter that the organization that was selling you a way for you to feel liberated, a way for you to feel empowered, was disempowering the women who are most vulnerable to corporate oppression. And that's obfuscated because you never get to see that. All you see is the product, all you get to see is the service. So those images are the ways in which we start to communicate with each other. Think about social media, for instance, and I have a sort of love-hate relationship with it because each of us have now become purveyors, creators of images. And the danger with images is that it sticks in your imaginary. It gives you a feeling of something being real. A nightmare would be if you lived an unhappy life, but everyone around you perceives you as living a good life. You would be trapped precisely because you want to be trapped in that sort of perception. What you want is to be seen that way, but you want to be seen that way because it's true of you. You smile. The old pictures, I remember asking my grandmother sometime why they never used to smile in pictures. And for her, it was not even a thought. It's just that you take a picture of me as I am at a neutral stance. We rarely do that. We smile. We want to convey that we are happy, that we are satisfied. Yesterday, one of the people I work with, they were taking several pictures here by the desk, and they asked me if I delete pictures that I don't like. And yeah, of course I do. I even, put in some filters. I try and make it look the best possible thing. But at some point it feels awkward. Like, you've seen someone take hundreds of pictures and you ask, why are they doing that? Why? It seems silly and we almost brush it off as a silly thing. But just like the older fish that asked the younger fish, how's the water, and the younger fish didn't know what was happening. The things that we swim in, the things that seem obvious, that are just background, those are the most powerful forms of ideology because they work on us whether we understand it or not. And the whole idea of presenting your life in a certain way, we uphold the desires of others. We want to be desired, and so we stoke the desires of other people. The dangerous thing I think about social media is we can become commodities that are being sold, that can be fetishized by other people, and we sell them the dream that they can be complete like us, that they can be as happy as we are, that they can follow us and listen to us, and in this parasocial relationship they will become as complete as we might be. And we are doing this, most of the people who create, most of the people who have creative outlets like this are trying to find some sort of wholeness. So the irony is you've got someone trying to find completeness, utilizing a tool only by taking the cheers of people who themselves are looking to be complete. And so it becomes this organism, this spectacle. I'll give you probably one of the quotes from the Society of the Spectacle. The spectacle is a concrete inversion of life, an autonomous movement of the non-living, a visible negation of life. A negation that has taken on visible form. Now, not to get too technical, but the Hegelian idea out of which these things come about is that every idea has within it not only the definition of what that thing is, but also what it is not. The joke is, someone walks into a coffee shop and says, I would like black coffee without cream. And the guy behind the bar says, I'm sorry, I only have coffee without sugar. And it seems like it's the same thing. It's still black coffee, but the way you define a thing, if I define it as, for me, black coffee is that without cream, and you say black coffee without sugar, the item seems the same, but its constitutive element involves the negation of something. It involves the lack of something. So me saying I am a man, for instance, if we talk about gender theory, the definition of man traditionally has been what is not a woman. And that means anytime you speak about man, you're carrying quietly the definition of woman. So that negation is always part of it. Now, reality and image are also, there's what something really is and there's what it appears to be. The relationship through spectacle is you're making visible things that are not real. You are posing, you are creating something that is a way you wish to be, and that obscures the way things really are. At a larger level, that means commercially, the products and services that we take on are mediated. We see happy faces, we see a way in which dreams are sold to us. Now, the injunction here is not to say, woe is me and jump into the river. I think the purpose for us is to live reasonably, to understand what it is we're being made to uphold. What rationale are we being asked to live? Why is it that you have those desires? Why is it that wearing a suit means formal and serious? When you investigate where those things come from, only then can you then understand that if society is composed of individuals and not commodities, can we actually change the way these social relations behave? The lie, or probably the problem with only having a dominant ideology, is we think this is just the way things are. And what is blinded to us is that commodities are the ones that compel us to live a certain way, that compel us to live a 9-to-5, that compel us to have certain forms of rationality. And our morality will start to bend to make sure our lives align with that morality. When instead we could question where that morality comes from, it comes from certain social relations. And if we think human beings are the most important thing, we need to be able to see past the things that are hidden. The best way to hide something and make it a little bit more powerful is to hide it from view. And that is by painting a seemingly humane face, by painting an image on top of it. So I hope this has given you some food for thought. If you have the chance, you can always Google Society of the Spectacle. I encourage you to also watch Century of the Self in the next few episodes. As you can hear, I've been reading a lot of Hegel, so we're going to jump into that German idealistic point of view. And interestingly, I'm also going to pull in Franz Fanon and one of our own Ugandan artists. So stay tuned. Cheers.